Marvin Lewis, the former head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, was known for two big reasons. One, taking the then putrid Bengals out of the depths of hell that were the 90s and the early 2000s. The other is not winning a single playoff game in the 16 years he was with Cincy. That stat alone, to me, is mind-boggling. To be the head coach of an NFL team for 16 years and to not win a single playoff game? Do I need to emphasize that at the time of his departure, he was the second longest tenured head coach in the entire NFL? The only person who had more time with their team was Bill Belichick. 6 rings, Bill Belichick. While that's not the point of the video, I just want to get my feelings out of there. I wanted to know why exactly he could not win a game. He had 7 different opportunities during his time, but each time they were one and done. In today's video, I want to briefly go over each game during that time, and from there summarize what went wrong and why Lewis's Bengals couldn't get it done in January. And why was he given the long leash he was given to begin with. Before we move on, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We're on the road to 2,000 subs. Thank you guys so much for your support. But let's look to Marvin Lewis and the Bengals prior to their union. Is that the right word I'm looking for? Prior to taking the head coaching job in Cincinnati, Marvin Lewis was the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. The same Ravens who dominated in 2000 when they won the Super Bowl primarily through their defense. After one season in Washington, Lewis was brought in by Mark Brown and the Bengals organization, who were desperately in need of a turnaround. The Bengals prior to Lewis were at the bottom of the NFL sellers year in and year out. From 1991 until 2003, Lewis's first year, the Bengals had a losing record in 11 of the 12 seasons, with one 8-8 season in 1996. Still not a winning season. Changes needed to be made if the Bengals were to have any chance of being a contender. And early on, it seemed like Marvin was the guy to do just that, having drafted franchise quarterback Carson Palmer in 2003 and going 8-8 despite Palmer riding the bench his rookie season. It seemed to all come together in 2005. The third year into the Lewis era, the Bengals would go on to finish 11-5. Palmer, along with Chad Johnson, TJ Hujmanzada, and breakout running back Rudy Johnson, compiled a season where some even argued if they could make a Super Bowl run this year. But unfortunately, this is where the series of unfortunate events would begin for the Bengals in the playoffs, as Palmer would have his knee rolled into, killing any chance the Bengals had at winning this game. The Bengals would ultimately lose 31-17. After their one-and-done game in 2005, the Bengals would regress over the next 3 seasons, but would get back on track into the playoffs in the 2009 season. This team, albeit not as good as the 2005 team, managed to win the AFC North with a 10-6 record. The Bengals would play the Mark Sanchez-led New York Jets. The Jets would ultimately come out on top with a 24-14 win. It didn't help that their best kicker in franchise history up to this point, Shane Graham, missed 2 crucial field goals that could have changed the game in favor of the Bengals. After a terrible 2010 season, which signaled the end of the Palmer, Ochocinco, and Terrell Owens era, the new era began in 2011 with second-round pick Andy Dalton and first-round pick AJ Green. Shout out to my AJ Green video. If you guys haven't checked that one out, be sure to do so after this one. The Bengals would squeak into the playoffs with a 9-7 record in 2011, and while they would go on to lose to the Texans and TJ Yates, there was promise. Yes, Dalton threw 3 interceptions and had no help from the run game. But the team was very, very young. Having just come off a 4-11-1 record the previous year, signs pointed up for the Bengals moving forward. The team looked to build in 2012, and they did just that by finishing 10-6, one more win than the previous year. They would get their rematch against the Texans in the playoffs, but again would come up short. They were a lot closer this time around as the defense did their part, holding Houston to below 20 points, and even scoring a touchdown on an interception by Leon Hall in this game. But the offense ended up no-showing again, failing to score a single touchdown on offense and losing to the Texans 19-13. From this point on, rumors began circulating Marvin Lewis if he was the man for the job. Up to this point, he is now 8 seasons in and now 0-4 in the playoffs. In 2013, Cincinnati's record would improve yet again, this time going 11-5. So it seems like every year, one more win, so it gives you just a little bit more hope. But as the title of this video were to suggest, do you think they did much in the playoffs this time? Well, maybe. Let's see. Now, in year 3 of the Dalton Lewis era, the hope was that they could finally put their January woes to bed. And they proceed to get blown out by the Chargers. 2014, made the playoffs again, but again, blown out again, this time by the Colts. But 2015 was just a little bit different. It felt like it all came together this season. This was one of the best defenses the Bengals had during this run, ranking number 2 in points and 7 against the run. The Bengals finished 12-4, matching their best season in franchise history and finishing with the 3rd seed. Anyway, I'm actually getting ahead of myself, so let's backtrack a little bit. The Bengals sat at 10-3 at one point in the season, and it seemed like all was going well. Dalton was having a breakout campaign and was even in the MVP conversation. Yes, this same Andy Dalton. But everything came crashing down in a Week 14 game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, very early on in the game, the Bengals were marching down the field and even made it to the red zone. Unfortunately, Dalton would throw a costly interception. To make matters worse, as he went for the tackle, Dalton would break his thumb in the process, ultimately ending his season. A big blow for a team that looked to be making a big statement this season. Down the stretch, they would go on to finish 12-4 and the 3rd seed like I mentioned earlier. So while they wouldn't be able to skip the wild card game, they at least get to host a playoff game. They would host that playoff game against, yep, you guessed it, the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you're a fan of the NFL, then you know what happens in this game. This is the Antonio Brown CTE game, where a lot of people pinpoint this game as where his mind started to derail. That is up for debate, but that's a topic for a different day. In a back and forth game against Pittsburgh, with AJ McCarron as the quarterback, the Bengals actually had the game in the bag. Vontaze Burfict, with just a few minutes left in the 4th quarter, had come up with a potentially game-sealing interception. And all the Bengals had to do was run out the clock. Sadly, on the very first play, Jeremy Hill, who was having a fantastic rookie season to this point, would fumble at the worst possible time. And on the ensuing possession, Vontaze, who had just been praised for his interception, would have the moment he is mostly known for in his career.
Roethlisberger from the pocket, middle of the field, incomplete. First slip, a flag does come in. Seemed like two Vontaze Burfict, and yes. Oh my goodness.
Burfict was hit with an unnecessary roughness penalty, and after a scuffle with Joey Porter, Adam Jones would be penalized himself for pushing a referee. And just like that, the Steelers were gifted 30 free yards. The Steelers would hit the last second chip shot field goal to send the Bengals home. And that was it for Marvin Lewis led teams making it into the playoffs ever again. It's tough to think that of the 7 playoff games Marvin Lewis played in, it was the first and the last that were most likely wins, but in different ways. God, I hate the Steelers so much. I do believe in a lot of these games, Lewis was at fault, while others were completely out of his hands. 2009, 2012, and 2013, I do believe were on Lewis for the most part. His guys simply weren't ready for the bright lights. That's another problem that Marvin Lewis led teams, and Andy Dalton actually too, would struggle with. It wasn't just playoff games. These guys would struggle a lot in primetime games too. In 2005, you can't control someone going below the knees to hit your superstar quarterback. Although the rules changed after Brady got hit, that was in 2008, guys. Palmer got hit in 2005, so it was fair game. The guy didn't even get penalized, y'all. Without your superstar quarterback, even back then, it'd be tough to win anything. The 2011 team was very young, and I personally think shouldn't even have made it to begin with. They exceeded expectations, but no one was thinking that they would be a Super Bowl team this early on. The 2014 Bengals didn't have AJ Green during their playoff game, and say what you want about 2014 being a blowout, because it was. You never know. Green usually did his part in playoff games, and he could have been a bigger difference in that game against the then San Diego Chargers. Finally, in 2015, very poor decisions and a costly fumble is what squandered a surefire win. And in the end, Lewis finished with that 0-7 playoff record in 16 seasons in the NFL. So while I can attest that there were games that were 100% on Lewis, this video is more about how he couldn't even win one. The NFL is a business, and at the end of the day, Marvin Lewis just didn't get it done. Yeah, I can make all these excuses that I want, but you're still 0-7. That's what the record books say. And since we're on the subject, I had another question that I wanted to answer real quick too. Just why was Marvin Lewis the head coach for so long? Why did this guy who didn't win anything get this many opportunities to begin with? I think there is a simple answer here though, that being that since the Bengals were terrible for so long prior to Lewis, the Bengals had at the very least some sort of relevance. They were fighting for playoff spots, maybe not every year, but they weren't fighting for the #1 overall pick every year like they were before him. To go along with that, since our regime has been notoriously cheap over the years, it was pretty cost efficient to keep Marvin Lewis around. So when you combine the fact that management was cheap and Marvin Lewis was cost efficient, it made for a recipe content with mediocrity. For as much flack the Bengals got for keeping him, I do understand it. So that's the video, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys so much for joining, and if you're still here, please sure to like and subscribe. We're on the road to 2,000 subs. Thank you guys so much for your support. I can't wait to make the next video for y'all, but until next time, it's been Shaboy.